Hey, human geography class. I am excited to say we are now on what I'm pretty sure this is my favorite unit. I know I say that a lot, but we're going to start on agriculture today, unit 5. And I think this is just such a cool unit because hopefully you'll come to realize that agriculture is all around us, but a lot of times we don't really stop and think about it. So we're going to get into all sorts of things about agriculture. Today we're just focusing on the intro. So, from College Board, the objective and essential learning for today: explain the connection between physical geography and agricultural practices. Agricultural practices are influenced by the physical environment, such as climate conditions. We see examples like the Mediterranean climate, tropical climates, and so on. And also, we'll be looking at intensive and extensive farming practices and get into a little bit of details on that. So, what factors impact the type of agriculture grown around the world? And the answer to that is twofold. So, we have economic factors as well as physical geography. So, we're going to look at physical geography first. For the physical environment, we have climate, space/landforms, and soil and nutrients to take into account. So for climate, that absolutely helps to dictate what type of agriculture might be present in an area. A lot of times the output is determined by the climate zone that it might be in, such as some of these that we see here. As some of our examples. This also includes the amount of rainfall that it receives. If we think also about space and landforms, is the land arable? Is it non-arable? What type of landforms do we see? Deserts, mountain ranges, or maybe some flat plains? And finally, soil/nutrients. What kind of nutrients does the soil have naturally? And if that's not the case, then how do those nutrients get supplied into that soil? So let's kind of break it down by the different climate zones. So we have tropical and subtropical, and you can see those here in different areas of the world. Those we see typically around the equator. So the practices that we see commonly within tropical and subtropical zones is something called shifting cultivation. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but essentially shifting the agriculture of that particular plot of land. We also see plantation agriculture as well, especially some that's maybe tied to some not pleasant history, right? In terms of characteristics of these places, we see high temperatures, abundant rainfall, humidity, and high amounts of vegetation. I used to live in a subtropical zone, and I can definitely attest to the high temperatures. The rainfall is also definitely key for some of that agriculture. Moving into some drylands and desert. Here we see practices such as pastoral nomadism, or when people will herd their animals and move with them from place to place in order to provide food. They'll basically move along with their herd. This is something that isn't practiced a whole lot anymore. It used to be a much more common practice, but now we do still see a few groups that continue this type of agriculture. Also livestock ranching. And you'll see that, some of these characteristics kind of lend to that, more to animal agriculture as opposed to plant agriculture. So some of these have to do with high temperatures, little rainfall. Sometimes these areas are mountainous, which makes it challenging to grow plants, and then little vegetation. Sometimes that area is just not conducive to growing a lot of plants. So even though maybe not big plants, there'll still be different grasses, maybe some grasslands. And because of that, it supports livestock ranching or livestock agriculture as opposed to plants. For temperate or mid-latitude zones, we see these colors right here. Here we see mixed crop and livestock, meaning that we see both animal agriculture as well as plant agriculture in these regions. It lends to both. We see commercial grain farming and commercial gardening or market gardening, aka lots of area for large farms in order to grow grains and also various fruits and vegetables. Dairy farming is also pretty common in these latitudes. This latitude also includes the Mediterranean climate, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. In terms of characteristics, we see seasonal changes between summers and winters in that a more variety of seasons and temperatures and climates, and also moderate rainfall. So hopefully you all remember back in Unit 1, this idea of environmental possibilism. So this just means that the physical environment can impact the ways in which human society develops. However, and this is, sorry, my dog's crying right now. However, humans can utilize technology in order to combat natural limitations. So this is not environmental determinism, right? This is environmental possibilism. And this kind of opens up this idea of people being able to farm both plants and animals, even in conditions that might not be perfect. So if we think about climate, greenhouses is a great way to overcome some of these climates and the limitations that they might pose. Space and landforms, people get very creative and clever. Things like terrace farming, which you could see here in this image. They'll also clear trees and vegetation in order to make the space more conducive to agriculture. We have soil and nutrients. Fertilizers are a great part of modern technology. Slash and burn agriculture also helps to put more nutrients into the soil. For water and precipitation, if that is a challenge, we have irrigation, and also in areas that maybe there's too much of wetland areas, they know how to drain them. So if we think about, let's say, the Netherlands with all the dikes and canals, these are the things that overcome some of these environmental barriers. And then also just a quick note, these modifications 100% absolutely do have impacts on environmental sustainability. So what factors impact the type of agriculture grown around the world? The physical environment, right? That's one of the big answers. The second one is economic forces. So in addition to some of these environmental factors, we also see things like the cost of land, the cost of labor, the cost of machinery. And those look different between intensive and extensive farming. So for intensive farming, characteristics that involve this type of agriculture includes a large amount of labor and or capital or investment, things like machinery and stuff like that. Small plots of land is characteristic because land is either scarce or just very expensive. Those two usually go hand in hand. Usually located near areas with high population density, so either right inside or just outside of urban centers. So these are some examples of things that you might see within intensive farming situations. For extensive farming, this includes fewer inputs of labor or capital, so it's just not as intensive. We usually see large plots of land because either there's a lot of land available or it costs little. Again, those two usually go hand in hand. A lot of times these are located away from major population centers, so in much more rural areas. And this is where we see things like livestock ranching, nomadic herding, things like that, that do require a large amount of land, but just not as much labor or capital. So continuing on economic factors, those are the things you need to keep in mind. So as well as the various forms of intensive and extensive farming.